Stars bled over Red Hollow, but Jonah Crane heard only desperate teeth gnawing rotten apples against his barn's weathered planks. Moonlight carved frostbitten grass into silver blades, while dust and thistle whispered beneath mesquite skeletal silhouettes. Jonah paused at the corral gate, hand resting on his Winchesters, but a pulsing scar of regrets long buried since losing his wife and Boy the Fever's cruel hand. He listened as three small voices, ragged and trembling, ripped at moldy fruit. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. He rounded the barn's corner, Rusty close at heel. The brindled hound nosed at a scrawny child's boot. Jonah squinted. Two girls and a boy, mouths stained crimson by decay's rot. Their ribs showed through pinched calico. One girl knelt beside a splintered bucket, tearing at apple halves with fierce urgency. A younger boy, no more than 4, plucked apple chunks and stuffed them into his mouth, while an older boy, silent as shadow, pressed back tears he could not swallow. Jonah's chest tightened, breath threading cold air. He knelt, setting rifle across his arms. Rusty sat, head tilted, vigil in fur. Jonah spoke soft as prayer. Hold fast. No one moved. He reached into a leather pouch and drew a crust of cornbread, crumbs trailing like lost promises. The girl paused, head tilting. He broke the crust in 2 and laid halves on the ground. Rusty nosed one. The children froze until Rusty's tail wagged in gentle encouragement. Then, furtive hands reached for bread. The girl rose, offering one half to the smaller boy. He bit and shivered. Jonah exhaled, hope's ember glowing in dust-choked night. He rose with careful grace. Come, he said, voice steady as cedar beams. He clapped softly. Rusty bounded forward, nudging children toward barn door. Inside, dust motes swirled in lantern glow, illuminating cedar planks and a stack of blankets. Jonah lit the lamp, aroma of kerosene sharpened nose. He gestured to a 3-tiered loft. Up there, he said. The girl, clutching a silver locket at her throat, helped the younger boy climb. The older boy hesitated, eyes wide with mistrust. Jonah knelt, offering empty hand. No harm. The boy placed a small bundle at Jonah's feet and ascended. Rusty followed, nosing the bundle. Rags of lace and linen, a mother's final keepsake. Jonah stepped to the corral gate. He grabbed an iron pot from his buckboard and filled it at the well. Each clank on cedar echoed like home's heartbeat. He carried the pot to barn's threshold and ladled stew into tin cups, pemmican and turnip soup, seasoned with salt pork's memory. Steam curled like prayers. He passed the cup to the girl, who pressed Locket's inscription, Hold the Light, against her palm. She drank in ragged gulps as Jonah watched. The younger boy took the second cup. The older boy held back until Jonah knelt and offered a biscuit. He chewed slowly, eyes flicking to the Locket's silver flash. Jonah cleared a patch of loft and spread blankets from his bunkhouse. He draped the girl's bundle around the children. Ragged shawls mended with careful stitches. Rusty circled thrice, tail low in gentle guard. Jonah climbed and settled on the top tier. The girl pressed a locket to her lips, then tucked it beneath her bundle. She offered flat eyes to Jonah, dark pools of sorrow and hope entwined. No words passed. Trust shaped each breath between them. Jonah peered through loft slats at moon's pale arc memories of his wife's lullaby brushed his mind. A promise he whispered to the sleeping orphans. Rest now. The girl closed her eyes. The younger boy's breathing slowed. The older boy pressed into her side. Rusty nestled beside them, muzzle on paws. Dawn's first finger carved frost from cedar. Jonah slipped outside, rifle at ready. The barn's door stood open. Hoofprints led across frozen ground toward Red Hollow Road. 2 sets, one spurred and firm, the other smaller, urgency's tread. Jonah exhaled, shouldering rifle. He fetched his oilcloth coat and draped it over the loft's edge, the scent of saddle leather and sagebrush drifting upward as an anchor. Back inside, Jonah offered leftover stew in a fresh cup to the girl. She stirred blanket folds and accepted without heretofore practiced timidness. Each spoonful was redemption's fire, forging bonds and shared warmth. The older boy helped ladle soup for his siblings, agency blooming in small hands. Jonah knelt beside the girl and pressed his palm to her locket's chain. He murmured, "I'll guard you." She nodded, a single tear carving a channel through soot on her cheek. He tapped his chest, promise wrought in flesh. That afternoon, Reverend Amos rode in on a gray mare, Bible strapped to saddle horn. He dismounted and crossed the barn. Jonah greeted him with quiet nod. "3 orphans," Amos said, voice soft as pine needle rain. "Their mother died when the landlord, Morrow, evicted them." Jonah's jaw clenched. Silas Morrow's name a poison. Amos shot the breeze away and mounted. "I'll pray they find shelter here." He paused, and justice. As Amos rode off, Jonah knelt by maples, watching the orphans gather sticks for a fire. Their small bodies shivered, but shored each other with blankets' embrace. Jonah fetched a coil of rope and tied a horseshoe near the barn's threshold, a ward against misfortune. He patted Rusty's head and called, "Fetch wood." Rusty bounded to join the children. Night settled in lantern's hush. Jonah loaded his colt and placed it on the loft floor. He climbed and sat beside the girl, hands folded across his lap. She pressed her head to his shoulder, locket's weight heavy but cherished. He wrapped an arm around her and watched the baby drift to sleep, mouth slack around blanket's edge. The eldest curled beside him, eyelids fluttering. Rusty's rhythmic sigh was lullaby beneath cedar beams. Outside, horses neighed at the corral gate. Tucker and Vance's mounts, silhouettes in moon's haze. Jonah's breath stilled. He rose and retrieved Winchester, reloaded with careful hands. He peered through slats. 2 figures dismounting, spurs clicking on frozen ground. They paused, scanning barn shadow. Jonah exhaled, knocked an arrow, silent sentinel's vow. The orphan stirred at distant hoofbeats, eyes wide with fear. Jonah whispered, "Hold fast." They pressed together, blankets drawn tight, hearts tethered to his steadfast form. In the hush before confrontation, Tucker and Vance's rifles gleamed at the barn door, and only Jonah Crane's vow, Rusty's loyalty, and 3 small hearts bound by a mother's locket could stand between sanctuary and storm. Hoofbeats shook red hollows dusk, but Jonah Crane's hand steadied on his colt as shadows crept near the barn's timber walls. Buck, the brindled hound, growled low, tail flicking like warning's banner. Jonah pressed back against cedar planks, breath slow as autumn's chill. He had led Clara, Eli, and Salmon to the loft, fingers gripping bundles of threadbare blankets, while Tucker's lone horse pawed frozen earth below. In the loft's hush, Clara pressed her locket, hold the light, against her small breast. Her dark eyes, wide as oilcloth lanterns, flicked at Jonah's silhouette. Eli crouched beside her, chin resting on clasped hands. Sam, clutching cloth doll, watched moonbeams through slatted boards. Jonah exhaled and lowered colt. "Hold fast," he whispered. No words left. Sanctuary shaped in shared silence. Below, a footstep rasped on cedar. Jonah slid aside a loose board, peered. Tucker's scuffed boots paused at the barn door, knife hilt glinting. Jonah thumbed Colt's hammer, ready. Buck nosed his hand. Jonah patted fur, trust forged in 2 heartbeats. At dawn's first sigh, Reverend Amos rode on a sorrel mare, Bible strapped to saddle horn. He dismounted and crossed the corral. Hand raised and blessings arced, Jonah greeted him, leading the minister to the barn's loft ladder. Amos climbed, eyes gentle as psalms. "Children," he murmured, voice like pine needle rain. Clara pressed locket into Amos's palm. He brushed her hair, a benediction without words. Below, Widow Mary emerged from her cabin's smoke-wreathed doorway, flower sack draped on arm. She climbed next, fingers trailing oilcloth's hem. "I'll teach her sewing," Mary said softly, settling beside Clara. She produced patchwork cloth, roses and plaids, and beaded needles. Clara's eyes brightened as she traced quilt patterns, hope's thread gliding through callous fingers. Jonah led Eli down at sunrise. "Chickens need feed," he said, voice low as meadow's hush. He handed Eli a woven basket of corn. Eli's small form pressed through gate. He scattered kernels among hens' cluck and flap. Each seed was promise sown in dust's belly. Jonah watched, brimmed at shadowing grief's edge, and saw Eli's shoulders straighten, agency found in simple task. Buck nosed at Sam's doll. Sam pressed the doll to his cheek, eyes bright in dawn's half-light. Jonah knelt and tied Rusty Bell to Buck's collar, a ward against darkness's return. Sam giggled, sound fragile as dried wheat. Jonah's chest eased, home's breath woven in loyal fur and child's laugh. That afternoon, Tucker's return thundered across the hollow. Buck's low growl rose beneath Jonah's boots. Jonah slid Colt from scabbard, eyes narrowed in cedar's shade. He eased a barn door, knife blade, Morrow's grim signature, wedged between door and frame. Jonas's warning carved in steel. Jonah pressed thumb to hilt's mark, then slid knife free. He knocked an arrow, drawing bowstring with Val's tension. Mary and Amos gathered orphans in loft, quilts draped over shoulders. Clara traced Locket's inscription, lips moving in silent prayer. Jonah climbed and tucked knife beneath his belt. "They'll be back," Amos said, voice soft as sunrise's first light. Jonah nodded, releasing arrow. Its feathered tail tapped roof against mesquite's hush. That night, by lantern's glow, Jonah crafted makeshift shutters of plank and rope. Mary taught Clara to thread needle. Each stitch stitched fear into hope's tapestry. Clara's fingers trembled as she sewed cloth to blanket's frayed edge. Jonah watched from doorway, grief's echoes softened by chosen family's vow. Eli dozed on bale, clutching basket. Sam's doll rested on quilt's fold. Buck lay at Jonah's side, watchful sentinel beneath oilcloth's glow. Amos knelt and pressed hands in prayer, each word a benediction for refuge found. Before sleep claimed barn's vigil, Jonah slipped outside. He traced boot prints, Tucker's and Vance's, circling barn like vultures. Moonlight carved frost filigree on corral rails. Jonah's colt rested at hip. He exhaled, pressing hand to colt's grip. Promise forged in steel's warmth. A whisper drifted through mesquite. Tucker's voice, low as grit's rasp. "We take them at dawn," he murmured to Vance. "No lawman will stop us." The rider silhouettes melted into sage's hush. Jonah returned to loft and pressed a hand to Clara's shoulder. "They plan to seize you," he whispered. Fear trembled in Clara's eyes. She pressed Locket to her heart. Jonah draped an extra blanket across her knees, protection woven in wool's weave. Clara nodded, eyes bright with silent courage. Below, Buck's growl rumbled through floorboards. Jonah climbed down, colt at the ready. He found Buck at the threshold, muzzle raised to barn door. Jonah pressed a gentle hand to the dog's head, then stepped outside. His silhouette bowed against moon's pale breath as he awaited dawn's reckoning. The rider's threat pulsed in each heartbeat. Only shared resolve, Buck's loyalty, and a mother's locket could guard sanctuary through the storm. In Red Hollow's pre-dawn hush, Tucker's shadow lingered by the barn door, its blade glinting in moonlight, whispering of a plan that would test Jonah Crane's promise and the orphan's fragile hope. A blade shadow scarred Red Hollow's barn, but Jonah Crane's vow burned fiercer in dawn's chill. Frostbitten grass crunched beneath his boots as he rode across Silas Morrow's wind-whipped yard, spurs whispering on worn cedar planks. Buck patted at his side, ears pricked for danger. Jonah halted before the landlord's oilcloth-wrapped door and dismounted, rifle leaned against his shoulder. The orphan's future turned on this stand. Silas Morrow answered in scowl and threadbare coat, arms crossed beneath greased leather vest. His two riders, Tucker and Vance, lingered behind, Winchester over shoulder. "What brings you here, Crane?" Morrow's voice was gravel and malice. Jonah's chest tightened. Memories of his own orphan boy flickered like dying embers. "I'm here for 3 children you evicted," Jonah said, voice low. Quit exploiting them for labor on your cotton fields. Morrow scoffed. They're your problem now. He waved to Tucker. Send them packing. Tucker's smirk was Blade's promise. Vance's rifle, but tapped ground in idle threat. Jonah lifted his chin. They'll never work for you again. He unbuttoned coat to reveal a tarnished deputy's badge, long hidden beneath Russ' weight. Morrow's eyes narrowed. Deputy Crane, he spat. Lost your badge and your mind. Jonah held the badge aloft, catching pale sun. I lost my boy, won't lose these three. His gaze flicked to Tucker and Vance. Leave Red Hollow or face justice. Tucker stepped forward, Winchester leveled. Buck lunged, growl low as thunder. Jonah raised rifle. Morrow's jaw clenched. No one drew fire. Only the hush of desert's edge, laws lined in cedar and steel. As tension curled like smoke, Clara slipped from barn loft to Jonah's stirrup iron. She held the silver locket. Its inscription faded. Hold the light. Jonah knelt and opened it. Inside, a folded scrap revealed faded ink. Mother hid us in Creek's hush, escaped Morrow's greed. Clara's eyes glistened. She pressed the locket against Jonah's chest. He nodded, vow renewed in metal's glint. Morrow scoffed and waved a hand. Get off my land. Jonah replaced his badge, voice steeped in mercy and steel. Then help these children find home. Morrow spat and turned. Tucker and Vance followed, heels loose on hose. Promise a return in their gaze. Reverend Amos arrived on battered buckboard, Bible in hand. He crossed to Jonah, voice soft as sagebrush wind. Justice with mercy. Jonah inclined his hat. Widow Mary climbed from the wagon, bolts of patched cloth and arm. She smiled at Clara. I'll teach you to sew your own quilts. Clara's face brightened. She clutched cloth to her heart, locket swinging. Mary met Jonah's eye. They'll be safe. Jonah led Eli to the corral, where broken rails sagged in autumn's gloom. He handed the boy a hammer and nails. We fix what's broken, he said. Eli's small fist gripped hammer. He drove nails home, each strike forging truss timber. Buck nosed at scattered boards, tail thumping. Jonah's gaze softened. Agency bloomed in child labor. That afternoon, Ranger Ben rode in from Silverton on a bay stallion. He tipped his Stetson, sun glinting off badge. Heard you taken 3 orphans under your wing, Ben said, voice gravel and kindness. Jonah introduced the children. Ben knelt and patted Sam's shoulder. Sam's eyes fluttered in shy trust. Ben rose and offered his ledger. I'll back your claim. Morrow's eviction was unlawful. Jonah exhaled. Law's promise restored order to broken hearts. As dusk draped the hollow in purple hush, Jonah climbed to the barn loft. Buck padded after. Clara sat sewing Mary's cloth into blanket's hem, each stitch whispering healing. Eli and Sam leaned close, tracing threads with wonder. Jonah pressed his palm to the locket at Clara's throat. She met his gaze with a nod. Shared courage woven in silver and thread. Below, Tucker and Vance returned under moon's pale eye. They crept to fence's edge, murmur of whispers and boot heels on frost. Tucker's torch flared to life. Amber threat licked scene's edge. Jonah felt Buck's growl ripple beneath him. He lifted rifle, barrel catching moon's gleam. Clara pressed a locket beneath Mary's quilt. Sacred ward against flame's draft. Jonah dropped from loft, Colt at the ready. He slipped outside just as torchlight licked fence rails. Mary and Ben formed flank, rifles raised. Together, they formed a ring of steel and prayer. Jonah stepped forward, Colt leveled at Tucker. Go, he said, voice steady as barley field in wind. Or face the law. Vance raised his rifle. Ben's gun barked warning. Tucker snuffed torch in Sinai growl and withdrew into Sage's hush. Vance followed, spurs clicking promise of vengeance. Jonah exhaled, shoulders easing under night's weight. He turned to the children. Clara's tears flickered in kerosene glow. He knelt, pressing a hand to her shoulder. No words, only the hush of defiance that wove them into family. Clara reached up, placing a locket in Jonah's hand. He brushed Silver's curve and returned it to her, trust restored in metal's loop. Eli bounded to Jonah's side, cheeks flushed with accomplishment. He pressed a nail-splintered finger into Jonah's palm. Jonah nodded, voice soft as dawn's first breath. Well done. That night, Jonah laid Colt and Badge on the barn's workbench beside Mary's quilt and Ben's rifle. He climbed aloft, settling between Clara and Eli. Sam nestled against his side. Buck curled at his feet, muzzle on paws. Lanterns glowed, danced on cedar beams. Jonah draped blanket across shoulders, protection woven in patchwork. Clara closed her eyes, locket resting on blanket fold. Outside, Mesquite sighed in Moon's hush. The hollow held its breath. Tomorrow's sun would test their family stand. But tonight, they were bound by more than blood, by chosen loyalty, mercy's vow, and a mother's final plea etched in Silver's light. In Red Hollow's midnight hush, Tucker's torch flared again atop the ridge, signal of vengeance undimmed, and only Jonah Crane's rifle, Buck's loyalty, and 3 small hearts bound by hold delight could guard sanctuary through the coming storm. Flames clawed Red Hollow's fence, but Jonah's Colt burned with defiance of steel. Cedar rails smoldered beneath Tucker's torch, embers dancing like broken vows in the wind. Jonah Crane stormed to the corral gate, rifle cradled against his chest. Reverend Amos and Widow Mary poured buckets of creek water over cords of fence. Ranger Ben shoved Burning with a side with booted heel. Buck, the brindled hound, snapped at flickering sparks, tail a banner warning. Smoke curled like shattered O's beneath the autumn sky. Clara's voice trembled from the barn loft. Hold fast. She clutched her mother's locket. Asterisk, asterisk, hold a light, asterisk, asterisk, to her heart. Eli pressing Sam's small head against the loft-shadowed wall. Jonah waded through ash and flame, each footfall a promise. No force would drive these children from sanctuary. Mary wrapped Clara and her brothers in woolen blankets, their edges singed by smoke. Clara pressed a locket against her mother's drawing, a fragile sketch left in Jonah's care. He had found it tucked inside the silver case, a mother's face etched by loss and love. Now Clara offered the drawing back to Jonah, trust woven in each pencil line. Jonah settled it into his breast pocket, closest to his own heart. Amos knelt beside the charred fence and traced his fingers along scorched cedar. They meant to burn us out, he murmured. Ben studied footprints in ash. Tucker's and Vance's spurred prints leading toward Morrow's cotton fields. They'll return with more men, Ben warned, voice low as slate. Jonah nodded, loading his coach chambers. Then we stand. As twilight bled into deeper blue, Jonah reinforced fence with spare planks and nails. Eli hammered with careful strokes, each clang of vow of protection. Sam pressed near Mary's skirts, eyes wide with the dance of fireflies in dusk's gloom. Mary whispered hymns beneath her breath, stitching quilt fragments into a prayer for safety. Buck lay at the barn door, muzzle on paws, sentinel against night's return. Inside, Clara and Eli stacked fresh blankets and a tin cup of water in the loft corner. Clara pressed a locket around Sam's neck, chained snug against his collarbone. Eli brushed straw from Sam's hair, each gentle stroke a tether to hope's dawn. Clara's small fingers lingered on the locket's silver curve, her mother's pledge alive in each glint. Ben rode out to Morrow's homestead under Moon's pale watch. He returned at dawn, ledger in hand. He found Jonah at the barn's threshold, rifle hung a hip, Buck snarling at the horizon. Ben spoke quietly. Morrow claimed children as laborers, cotton harvest's cheapest wage. He opened ledger to eviction records and rent unpaid, each entry crowned by Morrow's scrawl. Then he produced a locket's vellum note. Mother hid us in Creek's hush, escaped Morrow's greed. The word greed echoed in Jonah's mind like iron's cold cut. Jonah pressed his hand to the locket, then back to his chest. No words passed, only the hush of righteous fury. He tracked the ledger's final line. Trespassers subject to removal by hired riders. Jonah exhaled and strapped Colt beneath vest. They crossed the line. He said, Now we file charges. That evening, Tucker and Vance returned beneath stars' frozen glare. They crept to the barn's corner, rifles poised at loft-shadowed slats. Jonah slipped from hayloft to floorboards. Colt leveled at the door's keyhole. Amos and Ben flanked him, rifles ready. Mary and Eli huddled Clara and Sam behind stacked bales. Buck circled at Jonah's side, teeth bared in warning's growl. Tucker raised his rifle, his silhouette carved in gunmetal. Jonah fired. Colt barked Mercy's code. The bullet tore through Tucker's coat, splintering cedar post behind him. Tucker staggered, rifle clattering into dust. Vance lunged for Amos. Ben's rifle cracked, striking Vance's shoulder. Vance howled and collapsed among thistles. Buck leapt, muzzle snapping inches from Vance's boot. Jonah holstered Colt. Tucker and Vance lay subdued, rifles empty, faces pale beneath moon's hush. Clara climbed to Jonah's side, cradling Sam's head against her chest. She drew the mother's drawing from her shirt pocket and pressed it into Jonah's palm. Her finger traced the mother's eyes, haunted and hopeful. Jonah closed his hand over paper, nodding in silent thank you, trust sealed in pencil lines and silver's curve. Eli pressed forward, offering Tucker a basin of water. Tucker drank with shivering lips. Jonah stepped back as Reverend Amos produced cuffs, hard justice tempered by mercy. Mary draped blankets around the fallen riders. Each gesture balanced law's weight with compassion's balm. At dawn's fragile edge, Ranger Ben and Jonah rode to Dustwater Sheriff Station by buckboard. Sam peered from blanket behind Mary, trusting in the sheriff's badge glinting like hope's last prayer. Jonah filed a detailed report. Eviction for unpaid rent, child neglect, hired riders, attempted arson. Each signature sealed their stand, justice drawn in ink and courage. On returning, Jonah found a leather envelope pinned to the barn door by a deputy's hatchet. He broke the seal and withdrew a court summons. Crane versus Morrow. The call demanded the orphans return to Morrow's custody until trial. The summons thumped like doom's drum in Jonah's heart. Clara emerged from the loft, locket looped around her finger. She pressed her head to Jonah's side, eyes bright with fear and faith. Jonah folded the summons and tucked it beside the locket's drawing in his vest pocket. A shield of paper and silver. Buck nosed his hand, offering silent faith. Jonah exhaled, gaze drifting to charred fence rails and the rising sun's promise. He laid a hand on Clara's shoulder. "We'll fight," he said softly. Clara nodded, pressing Locket's curve into his palm. The children gathered around him, chosen family bound by sacrifice's seal. That afternoon, Jonah, Mary, Ben, and Amos gathered at the corral. They plotted journey to courthouse at sunrise's first light. Amos blessed their path. Mary packed flannel blankets for a courtroom chill. Ben mounted a stallion in full uniform. Clara tied the Locket's chain around Jonah's neck, his deputy badge and her mother's memory woven into one. At dusk's final breath, Tucker's and Vance's hoofbeats thundered in the distance, Morrow's final threat riding at them. Jonah raised his Colt, resolve blazing in steel's reflection. Clara pressed her face to Buck's flank, courage rising in brindle fur's warmth. In Red Hollow's twilight hush, court summons gleamed with Morrow's threat, and only unity forged in fire and mercy could carry Jonah Crane and three small hearts into Part 5's Dawn of Family. Dawn broke over Red Hollow, but Jonah's heart stood in Dustwater's courthouse, where three small lives hung in justice's balance. Mesquite shadows lay like lichen on weathered steps, and lantern lamps flickered in the courtroom's oak hush. Jonah Crane, spurs muted on floorboards, stood at Clara's left. Reverend Amos, Widow Mary, and Ranger Ben formed his silent guard. Clara, Eli, and Sam huddled before the bench, their breaths shallow as prayer's echo. Judge Whitaker rapped his gavel, with echo rippling through oilcloth banners. "We hear the petition of Jonah Crane for guardianship of Clara, Eli, and Sam Caldwell." His robes trailed like autumn's promise. Jonah laid the ledger on the bench. Morrow's eviction orders, rent unpaid, cotton labor contracts signed in Greed's scrawl. He placed a silver locket beside it, Its vellum note revealed a mother's plea. Asterisk, mother hid us in creek's hush. Escape Morrow's greed. Asterisk, Clara pressed a locket loop between her thumb and forefinger. Sam held her skirt. Eli's shoulder brushed Jonah's arm. Silas Morrow rose with practiced scowl, belt buckle gleaming brass. They belong to me, my labor, my cotton, he hissed. His voice rasped like sand across cedar rails. Jonah met Morrow's glare, voice steady as mountain stone. They belong to family, those bound by mercy, not profit. Amos laid a hand on Jonah's shoulder. Prayer's anchor in flesh. Mary stepped forward with Clara's patch quilt, a tapestry of hope sewn by gentle hands. She draped it across the bench, evidence of refuge born in community's love. Clara's small voice trembled in the hush. She rose on unsteady knees and held the locket high. My mother starved, she whispered, eyes bright beneath oilcloth lamps. She hid us, so we not work cotton fields. She died to keep us fed. Her words trembled like hollow wind through canyon. Judge Whitaker closed his eyes, breath hushed in the sacred space between mercy and law. Ben laid a hand on Morrow's ledger and recited deed's final clause. Child exploitation unlawful. He tapped pages where Morrow scrawled his name for cotton profits. The judge opened his eyes, gaze soft as dawn's first light. This court finds in favor of Jonah Crane. Guardianship is granted. Gavel fell like justicism. Silas Morrow's face drained color. Tucker and Vance absent. Their threats dissolved in law's sunrise. Deputies seized Morrow for neglect, threats, and hiring riders to exploit children's labor. As he was led away, Clara's gaze followed. Compassion sparked flickering in her dark eyes. Jonah exhaled, shoulders easing beneath vest's weight. He knelt and swept Clara into his arms. No words, only the hush of found family binding each heart. Outside, courthouse steps brimmed with townsfolk. Jonah descended with Clara on one arm, Eli at his side, Sam toddling close. Amos blessed their path, voice soft as pine needle rain. Mary drew Clara beneath her wing. Quilt's patchwork a tapestry of survival. Ben tipped his hat to Jonah and mounted his stallion, rifle cradled in leather scabbard. Rusty raced to their heels, muzzle raised in triumphant guard. Jonah lifted Sam into saddle. Buckboard brakes squeaked beneath their weight. He drove the team back to Red Hollow Ranch. Each hoofbeat of him of mercy returned. That afternoon, sunlight wove through mesquite like hope's thread as Jonah and the orphans returned to their barn. Fence rails mended by Eli gleamed in fresh pine sap. Quilts patched by Mary fluttered on lines like banners of refuge. Jonah dismounted and knelt beside Sam, who pressed his cheek against the boy's small palm. Sam's eyes glistened as he whispered, Papa. The single word echoed through Jonah's chest, a balm for Grease Hollow. Clara slipped from saddle, boots thudding on cedar planks. She carried a tin bucket of marigold seeds, golden sunbursts of healing. Jonah knelt beside her and guided her small hand as she pressed seeds into turned soil by the corral gate, each seed of promise rooted in mercy's soil. Clara's head rested on Jonah's shoulder. Locket swung against her chest, her mother's memory entwined with newfound love. As dusk softened and lanterns glow, Jonah fetched a cedar shelf from his bunkhouse. He ascended the loft ladder, each step a vow. He nailed the shelf above the hearth, its grain warmed by lamp's flicker. Clara stepped forward and placed a locket atop the shelf. Chain loop around a carved nail. Hold the light, etched in silver's curve. She lay beside it her mother's drawing, lines soft as memory's breath. Jonah descended and wrapped an arm around Mary's shoulders. Silent thanks for her gentle hand in their new family's tapestry. That evening, Jonah, Amos, Mary, and Ben gathered by the hearth. Amos offered prayer blessing. Mary passed bowls of stew, pemmican and turnip soup, each spoonful a communion of sustenance and grace. Clara ladled for Eli and Sam, each action a testament to agency reclaimed. Jonah sipped from his tin cup, savoring warmth in chest hollow. Buck nosed scraps from fallen crumbs, tail wagging in gratitude. Under red hollow starlit sky, Jonah tucked the orphans into the loft. He draped quilts around them, Mary's first stitches woven into each fold. Clara pressed her head to Eli's shoulder. Sam nestled at Clara's side. Jonah knelt at the ladder's foot and placed a gentle hand on each child's shoulder. "Good night," he whispered. Promise carved in cedar and quilt's weave. No child left hungry or alone in his care. He rose and stepped outside, breathing deep the pine-scented night. Rusty pressed against his leg. Jonah knelt and stroked brindle fur, loyalty's echo in each gentle stroke. He gazed at the barn silhouette against the sky's vast canvas. Heart at last anchored and found family's bond. Dawn's first robin sang as Jonah rose to greet morning. He crossed the marigold patch and found buds breaking through earth's crust, promise's golden herald. Clara emerged, hair braided and apron tied. She offered Jonah the first bloom. He placed it in his buttonhole, heirloom of hope woven in petals. Sam toddled forward, hand outstretched. Jonah lifted him and pressed a kiss to golden crown. Eli skipped to join them, laughter bright as captured stars. Together, Jonah Crane and 3 small souls stepped into Red Hollow's new day, healed of grief, bound by love, and affirmed in family's dawn.